Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for rank play in patch 11.19. For the first time in a while, we've had a meta evolve and settle without any hotfix or B patches to shake things up. What that has left us with is a well-balanced meta with plenty of solid options ranging from defensive frontliners, utility champions, and a wide mix of potential carries. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off our top 10, we have Ziggs and Clad taking the number 10 together. Hellions are the talk of the town in the current meta because they are by far the best composition for playing a reroll comp. Both Ziggs and Clad are viable carry options, with Tristana floating off in the distance as a less viable but still playable carry. Ziggs and Clad are equal in terms of their strengths, they just cover two different build paths based on what you hit and what items you have. Of the two, Clad is likely the easiest to play because AD items are so commonplace in the meta. Plus, if you don't hit, pivoting out is easy enough to do since you can transfer AD items to a 3-cost champion like Riven and then to a 4-cost like Draven. Ziggs is capable of being an item holder for AP carries, but those compositions are a bit less common, so pivoting can be tricky. Keep in mind though that these are 1-cost champions, so even 3-starring them is just a potential top 4, as winning with Ziggs 3 or Clad 3 is rather hard to do. That said, if you're the type of player that enjoys re-rolling, then these two champions are the current best in the meta. Up next, we have Nunu coming in at number 9. Even though AP boards are a bit less common than AD, the fact is Abomination is still the main driving force behind those compositions. At the center of any Abomination composition is, of course, Nunu. Nunu also has other uses in the meta, one being just how good he is in the early game as a frontliner, both because of the Brawler trait and because his ability does quite a lot of damage, especially if you have any defensive items to keep him alive long enough to nom more than once per round. Another way to utilize Nunu is to give him a Renewer emblem. This composition, known as Renunu, is very much on the fringe of the meta, but it is playable if you manage to get all the pieces together, namely the Renewer emblem and Nunu 3. The main reason for Nunu being in the top 10 is because of how pivotal Nunu is for Abomination and AP carries like Velkaz, Heimerdinger, or Teemo. Karma is more or less in her own little bubble of the meta with Dawnbringer, but there are ways to run her with Abomination as well. All in all, if you're looking for a solid early game frontline, then we recommend Nunu, and if you're looking to play an AP comp, then we definitely recommend Nunu. Moving along, we have another joint place on the list with Riven and Nidalee coming in at number 8. Riven and Nidalee are together again in our top 10 because of a few reasons, but the main reason being their capabilities as item holders during the early and mid-game portions of the game. Riven extends that a bit further by being capable of carrying into the late game if you 3-star her, but that's a relatively rare occurrence in the current meta. Mostly the goal with Riven or Nidalee is to hold on to AD items until a 4-cost carry is usable. What also helps the case of Riven and Nidalee is that they're both Dawnbringer. Dawnbringer is a fantastic synergy throughout the whole game, and both of these champions can be used with it all the way until stage 5. Skirmishers are a bit up in the air right now, but they still have an amazing stage 3 with Nidalee as the carry, and Legionnaire is one of the better traits in the current meta to help Riven succeed. Riven also has a place later on in the game as a trait bot, either for Legionnaire or Dawnbringer. Overall, these 3-cost champions are in a bit of a rough spot right now, but anytime you're in need of a solid item holder during stage 2, 3, and 4, then either Nidalee or Riven are good options to go with. Unfortunately, we have a bit of a fallen soldier in our top 10, as Rell is only coming in at number 7 this patch. It's sad to see, but Rell has slowly been falling out of priority, especially as other frontline champions have risen up in value. There's a few reasons for this, but the main reason is they've nerfed Rell quite a few times, and it's finally taken a toll on how well she performs. Redeemed is also lacking in the meta, with Velkaz being used mostly with Abomination and Kale being barely playable at all. Ironclad and Cavalier are both solid synergies, which keeps Rell relevant in the meta, but aren't quite enough to push her lower on the list. As it stands, Rell does well when 2-starred by being able to cast once a fight, provides 2 useful synergies in some comps, but is otherwise not all that useful when compared to champions like Galio or synergies like Revenant. Continuing down the list, we've got Gwen coming in as the number 6 champion. Gwen is our resident Mystic of the list, but honestly, she's not even here because of her traits. While Mystic is useful depending on the lobby, AD boards are much more common in the current meta. Inanimate is also a handy trait to have, but it's relatively lackluster since the zone is rather small and the duration relatively short. What makes Gwen so good is how well she holds onto items in the late game and turns into a reliable secondary carry. Reliable may be a bit generous since you do need a 2-star for that, but still. The Gwen with items is beastly and does a lot of damage, especially when there's beefy frontliners to help her snip. So Gwen is a capable late game carry, is easy to splash in because of Mystic, and gets some value from having an animate on your board. Those are plenty of merits to warrant a spot in the top 10. Sliding into our number 5 spot on the list is Draven. Draven is finally a mainstay of the meta. All it took were several patches buffing him and a mini rework that added a passive to ignore 50% of the target's armor. It did seem a bit iffy initially for Draven because they did drastically nerf other parts of his kit, mainly his base damage. Being able to ignore 50% armor baseline has been a huge improvement, especially since it allows players to skip running a Last Whisper on him. It also helps that Legionnaire and AD compositions in general are doing well. That means there's plenty of item holders to pivot from into Draven, as well as the boards themselves being smooth to transition from. Riven, for example, is already going to be utilizing Legionnaires and is one of the best AD item holders, so you can see how that would make for an easy pivot into Draven. Having more options in the meta is always nice to see, especially since Draven has been mostly absent ever since the mid set dropped. Up next is the laser squid himself, Velkaz, coming in at number 4. We've mentioned several times that in the meta, AP compositions aren't doing all that well, but that's in comparison to the amount of options AD boards have. There's Lucian, Draven, Aphelios, Kled, Akshan, and several other potential carries. For AP boards, there's mostly just Karma, Velkaz, and the occasional Ziggs. Heimerdinger is viable but difficult to play consistently, and Teemo is more of a supporting champion than an actual carry, since 2-starring him consistently is hard to do. Between Karma and Velkaz, Velkaz is the winner for champion of AP, mainly because of flexibility and consistency. Flexibility means there's not a completely rigid way of playing Velkaz, whereas for Karma, it's basically Dawnbringer or bust. Velkaz does best with Abomination, but as long as you have a frontline and another Spellweaver, the squid can carry. What matters more is positioning and items with a huge emphasis on proper positioning. And that's the main downside to Velkaz. If you're positioned poorly, which at times can just be a coin flip, the chances of winning the round go down drastically. But a well-positioned Velkaz with good items and a solid board backing him is right up there with any of the top AD carries. Coming in at number 3, we have Galio. Galio seems to have taken over for Rell as the best all-around frontline champion. Even without Sentinel or Knights, Galio is quite good. The fact that his ability taunts in such a large radius, does damage, and can heal him makes him the perfect item holder for defensive items. This also means Rell is often left without any items, which makes her weaker comparatively to Galio. It also helps for Galio that Sentinels and Lucian are doing well in the meta. This means anytime you see Lucian, there is going to be a Galio. Draven has also increased how contested Galio is, since Galio and Draven are so good together, even better in terms of synergy than Galio and Lucian. All in all, if you need a better frontline, look for Galio. Just keep in mind it may be difficult to 2-star him. As we just mentioned him, let's move on to the champion coming in at number 2, Lucian. Lucian is by far the best all-around 4-cost carry in the current meta. The main reason for this is consistency throughout the game. Most of the 4-cost units struggle to perform well at level 1 without full items and a board to back them. Lucian, on the other hand, does just fine with just 1 or 2 items and 3 Sentinels. What that does is when you're running Lucian as your carry, you can basically bypass the growing pains of stage 4, stabilize much faster than other boards, and move towards level 8 comfortably. From there, you can find Lucian 2 in the rest of your board and stabilize again, meaning level 9 is now a possibility. Level 9 is relatively rare for any board to reach, but 6 Sentinels plus Lucian 2 is one of the best at doing so. Adding all the pieces together, it's easy to see why Lucian is doing so well, even though he's extremely contested. And coming in at number 1, we have Teemo. While we did mention earlier that Teemo isn't great as a carry, he is still all around the best late game champion in the meta. And Teemo is capable of carrying, just doing so is difficult since not everyone is able to find Teemo 2 or even have the health to do so. But even without being a consistent carry, Teemo has a huge impact on the meta. The reason for this is due to his ability, which slows the attack speed of champions hit by his mushrooms by 50%. In a meta that favors AD and auto attack based champions, a 50% slow is ridiculously strong. Sure, it's not always guaranteed because the way Teemo targets is random, but anytime one mushroom lands on the enemy carry, the chances of winning go up dramatically. On top of that, Teemo is also a Hellion and cruel. Cruel won't always come into play, but it does squeak out cheeky wins, which save health that the player otherwise would have lost. And Hellions are doing well enough that Teemo is a viable option for those builds. There's few other champions you will always see used in the late game regardless of the comp, as long as the player has room and health to play Teemo. That's it for our top 10 champions of patch 11.19, but before we go, we've got a few honorable mentions to talk about. Our first honorable mention is the good old trio of Revenants, Ivern, Volibear, and Fiddlesticks. Even though Revenant is a bit weaker than it has been in the past, this trio of frontline champions are doing well in the meta. Just none of them are standing out enough to warrant a spot in the top 10, they're just solid options if you're in need of a good frontline. Fiddlesticks is likely the best of the three because of how well he can hold on to items, especially emblems like Spellweaver or Assassin. And our other honorable mention is a duo of champions, Aphelios and Akshan. Ranger is a viable composition in the meta, but it struggles with consistency because the boards to run either Aphelios carry or Akshan carry are quite expensive. And you do need to 2-star them to even consider playing either of them as a carry, so stabilizing at level 7 can be difficult. That said, if you're able to hit level 8, have good items for them, and can 2-star either carry, then those two Rangers are right up there with the other AD champions in the meta. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. Overall, there's a lot of diverse options in the meta, especially with Draven becoming a playable carry. Whether it's early, mid, or late game, there's always a selection of top-tier champions to play. Let us know in the comment section below what champions you've been having the most success with. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.